John Kasich went on CNN to discuss Judge Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh now, and his commentary really made my blood boil, almost to the point of irrational anger that I felt. So let's watch, and then I'll explain why I felt this way.
The Senate has confirmed Brett Kavanaugh. He is now a justice. Are you happy about that?
Well, I'm not happy about the process, Dan.
Are you happy? Let's just start with him. Are you happy he's on the Supreme Court?
It's not about a matter of happy. I mean, he's on the Supreme Court. We have to respect the fact that the Senate made that decision. We had two people who I deeply respect, Murkowski and Collins, two Republican senators that saw it differently. I have not had a chance to read that report, as have the rest of Americans, but the decision has been made, and I respect that decision, and we would hope that the court will now move in a direction where they can make decisions, and I would hope that the court will not become ideological. That would begin to erode confidence in the court. In fact, confidence in the court has already been eroded. But Dana, let me tell you what I'm particularly worried about. You know, our leaders need to stop playing a zero-sum game, like flipping a coin. You know, I win, you lose. Leaders need to figure out a way to bring people together. Now, they can have a victory, but they can't leave the person who loses vanquished. And that's so much of what we're seeing. And in a zero-sum game, we get to a point where any tactic is acceptable, and then we use our tongues and we say things that we ultimately can deeply regret. And, you know, the tongue can also be powerful, you know, through the use of social media. Now, what's required? It requires leadership to stabilize, to make sure that they're not vanquishing their opponent. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. I was thinking about this morning on the ride over here. John McCain in the middle of a presidential campaign. Remember, that's a guy who we memorialized about 3 weeks ago, where Republicans, Democrats celebrated his life and his leadership. He was at a town hall meeting and somebody started viciously accusing Barack Obama. McCain, in the middle of the campaign, said, "I don't agree with you," and knock it off and stop it.
Senator,
and as I recall, there were people in that meeting who booed him. But you see, it wasn't, "I need to win at all costs." And that's where we're operating today, Dana, and it needs to stop, and our leaders need to lead the way.
Talking so much about the Senate, I accidentally called you Senator Governor. My question for you is, you have been talking about this, frankly, as you know, sort of screaming into the wilderness about this need to step up. What makes you think now is going to be any different?
Well, look, the first thing is when people ask why should they vote, now they have a chance in November to vote and declare their message loud and clear. But what has to happen, Dana, at all levels. You know, if you're the CEO of a company, because the Kavanaugh situation has got people yelling and screaming at each other who are just next to each other's offices. CEOs need to calm it down. You know, the business leaders are important. Our religious leaders should be calming this down and offering respect for others. And our political leaders, they need to realize that at the end, they're going to be out and no one is going to remember them. I saw George Mitchell the other day, and, you know, he was a fine leader. He could be partisan, but he was a fine leader. No one remembers who he is. All he has is his reputation. And so what I'm suggesting is our leaders need to be bigger than themselves. I was there at a time when I saw leaders who could embrace and make sure that it wasn't a win-loss situation.
So, Governor, you're talking about the midterms. We are 1 month away from the midterm elections. President Trump stacked up some pretty big wins this week. Unemployment just hit a 49-year low. He got Mexico and Canada to come to the table on trade, 2 Supreme Court justices so far. Is President Trump, do you think, going to help Republicans now in November?
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, the court, it could be a short-term win. If the people of this country are so divided, let me tell you what I think a president should do. You're going to nominate a Supreme Court justice, and you're a Republican, you know you're going to have a conservative. I support conservatives on the court. But it would make sense to work with a Democrat who would say, okay, I know it's going to be conservative. All right, let me help you to pick somebody so that we don't go through this. We didn't go through this with Gorsuch.
Should they not have pushed Kavanaugh the way that they did? Was it short-sighted?
I think the whole look, it's both sides. A pox on both houses for the way this was conducted, and people in the country are appalled. That's because it's like, I got to win and you got to lose.
I'm so tired of this brand of fake intellectualism. This is like the holier-than-thou, tone police, civility police, where you're not really saying anything, but you want to pat yourself on the back and sniff your own farts and tell yourself that I'm so above this game of politics, and I'm just wonderful in temperament and leadership. You're not saying anything, John. You're not saying anything. Okay, look at the points he makes. He's asked straight up if he supports Kavanaugh. His answer is, I'm not happy about the process. Then Dana Bash tries to get him to give his actual opinion on Kavanaugh. It's not about that. I'm not happy about the process. Does he actually support Kavanaugh? Of course he supports Kavanaugh. Why? Because Kavanaugh is an asshole right-winger who's an elitist, whose views are down the line, far right. And John Kasich, despite his mild temperament, actually agrees with those policies and with that philosophy. So that's why he dodges that question. But what does he do? I'm going to try to get people across the aisle to like me because I'm going to say, this process, tut. Why would you have this happen? You're supposed to be polite and civil to each other as you fuck up the country. He says, I'll hope that the court will not become ideological. See, this is, again, I can't stand this because he's living in a fantasy land. This idea of like, well, look, the court is obviously above politics and neutral and objective. And, well, now that, rapey McLiar elitist asshole is going to get on the course, I hope that the court is going to remain non-ideological. Are you fucking kidding me? The court has always been ideological. Everything is ideological. You know, this fucking tap dance, this charade that all the justices go through when in their hearings to get approved, where they have to say, I can't tell you how I feel on that particular issue because it depends on the facts of that particular case, and I'm somebody who only goes by what the law says, and I'm not somebody who puts my personal politics into it. Nonsense! There are readings of the Constitution that fall in a more left-wing direction. There are readings of the Constitution that fall in a more right-wing direction. Which interpretation do you do? But they have to dodge it. Oh, we're above politics. And John Kasich is feeding into that fucking Fantasyland garbage of, well, I hope the court's not ideological. The court is deeply ideological. He's bullshitting you, and as he's doing it, he's trying to make it so that it's a veneer of intelligence and bipartisanship and above the fray thinking. That's what it is, and that's why it annoys me so much, because that's a fraud, because that's not what this is. And then he says, well, we got to stop playing a zero-sum game. It is by definition a zero-sum game. If Kavanaugh gets on the court, Republicans win. If Kavanaugh's off the court, Democrats win. By definition, either a right-wing judge is or isn't going to get approved. It is a zero-sum game. I know that, Kasich wants, hold hands and sing Kumbaya with me because we picked a guy who's going to ruin the country, but at least he's nice and polite as he does ruin the country. I like how I changed his voice from this guy to this guy. That was pretty random and funny. But yeah, I'm so sick of this nonsense. Like, he effectively what he wants is somebody who's just as bad as Kavanaugh ideologically, but his tone and temperament is better. And that leads to the final point when he says, business leaders and religious leaders need to calm everybody down. The system is garbage, John Kasich, and people know it now. People see through it. Doesn't matter how many times you put a fucking, priest in front of us, and by the way, look at all the scandals now of them raping kids. It's even more widespread than we thought. We already knew it was widespread. You're not going to put a fucking priest in front of us, religious leaders. You're not going to put business leaders, who, by the way, rigged the system in favor of corporations and against regular people. You're not going to put those people in front of us. All right, guys, calm down now, because you have to understand that we're trying to do what's best for you by gutting all environmental regulations and gutting all labor regulations and labor rules, and by saying the president might be able to pardon himself. We're just, everybody be calm and relax as we fucking destroy everything in sight. And he doesn't get the urgency because he himself is an elitist prick. He doesn't get what's happening in this country, and that being mild-mannered and civil is not something that's going to improve the country and not something that is desired. When the country's being pillaged and destroyed, you have to fight back. You have to fight back and not take no for an answer, not do violence, but civil disobedience, and have the voice of the people heard. But his whole shtick is, oh, come on, let's all be mild-mannered together, and a pox on both your houses. Both sides do it. You're all equally guilty in this. Well, no, when it comes to Kavanaugh, one side was correct in saying keep him off the court, minus Joe Manchin, dick, and the other side was wrong in trying to put him on the court. So there is no, like, oh, let's reconcile this and fucking hold hands together. Fuck off! It is ideological, it is political, and we're gonna fight over it. And your whole, like, I'm a nice guy above the fray shtick is totally vapid and vacuous and substanceless, and we can see through it from a mile away. And by the way, if you think, John Kasich, there's a lane for this in today's Republican Party, even though Kasich probably agrees with Trump on 90% of the political issues and would govern the same way, the mild-mannered thing, like, dead and gone, especially in the Republican Party. There's no way. So he thinks like, oh, maybe I'll challenge Trump in 2020. He genuinely thinks that. And it's like, what? How fucking naive are you? Now, there is one scenario which actually would kind of be awesome, not going to lie. If Trump runs, Kasich hops in as like an independent and runs, and then obviously up against like Bernie Sanders or somebody like that. Because then it would be, can Kasich get like 4% of the right-wing vote? Yes, he can get 4%. So if he gets 4%, that alone ruins Trump's chance of being reelected. So is he going to be a spoiler in the end and actually make it so that I'd be giving him credit? Could be. That could be. But make no mistake about it. If he were to jump in like that, it would be because he's trying to spoil it. Because I think even he's not dumb enough to think he can win. But he does think that this has a lot more appeal than it does. The mild-mannered, oh, I'm the nice guy above the fray thing. That's dead and gone. Listen, Kasich, it's no longer 1992. It's a new political atmosphere, and you need to recognize it.